So I know it might feel like forever, but the Yeezy Boost 350 V2 has only been out for the last 5 years. But in those last 5 years, there have been a pretty large amount of changes to the original 350 V2 silhouette. So today in 2021, almost 5 years after the original Beluga 1.0s dropped in September of 2016, we're gonna compare this shoe to the latest 350 V2 drop, the Ash Pearls. What's up everybody, I'm Seth Fowler, and today I'm comparing the very first 350 V2 to the latest 350 V2. First off though, thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell down below if you want to see more content just like this, and also make sure to give me a follow on Instagram and on Twitter at @RealSethFowler. But before we jump into the video, I want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor who made this entire video possible, FARFETCH. FARFETCH is the best place to find the best selection of high-end and designer goods. FARFETCH's website takes product from hundreds of boutiques all around the world so that you can find the exact item that you're looking for a great price. Even though it's really hard to find pieces that you can't find anywhere else, because they have such a large network of boutiques that they work with, you can find whatever you're looking for. And something else that they do that I really like is that they actually feature the brand new and up and coming designers so that you can be wearing their stuff really before anybody else. And as you probably could have guessed, both of the sneakers that we're talking about in today's video I grabbed from FARFETCH. But check this out, even though I bought these shoes through FARFETCH, they actually came from Stadium Goods because FARFETCH owns Stadium Goods. And what's so great about that is that because you're buying shoes from Stadium Goods, all the shoes are being looked over by real people to guarantee that every shoe that you buy is authentic. And that's especially huge in the sneaker world where there are so many fakes going around. If you're spending the amount of money that you need to spend to buy a shoe for resale, you want to make sure that that shoe is authentic and you're not buying something that's not genuine. I've mentioned this before, but one of my favorite things about buying shoes through FARFETCH is that even though the shoes are coming from Stadium Goods, you can actually return them because FARFETCH has a 14-day return policy. For example, if you buy yourself a pair of 350 V2 Belugas, you got them delivered, you tried them on and realized, oh no, they don't fit, you can return them to FARFETCH within 14 days and get your size. Not only that, they actually have a courier come to your house and pick up the shoes from you. It's incredible. You don't even have to go anywhere to drop them off. Not only that, FARFETCH is also very environmentally conscious, and they let you know when a brand or a product that you're looking at is using recycled materials or materials that are very environmentally friendly. One thing that I love about these newer Yeezys, and it's not really a big thing, but it's something that over time will definitely make a difference, is that on these hang tags, they're actually using twine to attach them to the shoes rather than plastic. So if you would like to check out FARFETCH for yourself, which I definitely recommend, make sure to click the link in the description below and use my discount code SETH10YT for 10% off your first order. You can grab either one of the Yeezys that we talked about in today's video, or really any pair of sneakers because they have everything. So make sure to check out FARFETCH and use my discount code SETH10YT. I actually also have a list of my favorites on FARFETCH, which I've linked in the description below. So if you guys would like to check that out, make sure to click that link. So the Adidas YEEZY Boost 350 V2 Beluga first released on September 24th, 2016 for a retail price of $220. And as I've already mentioned, it was the very first 350 V2 to ever release. And overall, it was a pretty huge change from the original Yeezy Boost 350s. The design and silhouette of the shoe had been very heavily refined, it felt better on your feet, it didn't have paint on the midsole which would rub off over time, and the overall shape got a lot sleeker and a lot better looking. In fact, the original Yeezy Boost 350 only had 4 colorways released. Yes, one of them did release twice, but it was still the same color. And those releases all really took place within a 1-year time period, whereas with the 350 V2, we have almost 20 plus colorways of this shoe, and we've been getting releases since 2016. Whether you like the 350 V2 or not, you've got to admit that it's a pretty amazing silhouette, not only because of the materials that are used in this shoe and the overall design of the sneaker, but also because of its cultural impact. And even now, 5 whole years later, we still have brand new 350 V2 colorways coming out later this year. And what's amazing to me is that even though these two shoes, the new version and the old version, are technically the same silhouette, they are pretty different. In fact, I think It's Teddy said it best, the newer Yeezy Boost 350 V2s are kind of like a 350 V2.5. Yeah, it's still the same shoe, but it does feel a little bit different on foot, and the design language has changed pretty dramatically. But before we actually dive into the sneaker portion of the comparison, I want to take a quick look at the boxes. Now, as you can tell, both of these boxes are very similar, except for the smushed end on this one. And to be honest with you, if I was just looking at the tops of these boxes, I wouldn't know which box goes with which shoe. Both boxes come with a pull-out drawer. They both say Boost on the bottom side of them. They both come with like a blackish brownish printing on them. The only place that you start to see differences are on the ends. On the end of the original box, you actually have an extra line of text, which is adidas.com/Kanye. And the reason I would assume that they removed it is because the link is now adidas.com/Yeezy, and so this probably doesn't really take you anywhere. Maybe to adidas.com/Yeezy. I don't know, but I'm not mad that they took out the website. The newer boxes just say Yeezy Boost 350 and made by Adidas, and they also have this gap in the middle, which if you'll notice on the other side is usually where the size tag goes. Now while the size tags on both of these boxes do look pretty similar, they are slightly different. The colorway naming scheme has changed a little bit. On these newer Yeezys, they have the same colorway 3 times. On the older ones, it's slightly different. Also, the layout of the tag is a little bit different. It's nothing major, but if you're like legit checking a pair of sneakers, it's a good comparison to have. But that's pretty much all there is to it. Now let's get into the shoes. So the first difference that I wanted to discuss between the 2016 350 V2 and the 2021 350 V2 is the most obvious difference, and that's the pattern on the upper. Both 350s come with a pretty similar feeling prime knit upper. However, the actual prime knit pattern has changed pretty dramatically. The original 2016 350 V2s feature a very noticeable swirl or wave texture all over the upper of the shoe. Obviously on the Beluga 1.0s, it comes in a shade of gray with a darker shade of gray as the accent color, and you can really get a good shot of this wave pattern on the medial side. It's very defined, it's very obvious, and it also features these really cool hits of orange kind of woven throughout that are sort of like the base layer of the upper. The newer 350 V2s though feature a much more staticky and crazy looking prime knit pattern, which actually started with the 2018 350 V2 Statics. Funny story, this is actually the only pair of 350 V2s that I still own. I got rid of all my other pairs. I just like how wearable this pair is, and at the time I really loved this prime knit pattern. I mean, I still do, but I've kind of gotten used to it at this point. We have so many different 350 V2s with this pattern, it's gotten a little old. Now what's interesting about this newer prime knit pattern is that if you really look at the medial side of this shoe, you can sort of make out a little bit of that same linear pattern that was found on the original 350 V2s. Obviously that was done on purpose, and it still maintains some of that same sort of design language while still pretty dramatically changing up the aesthetic of the shoe. The thing about these newer 350 V2s is that the colors all sort of blend together on these shoes, and they make the shoe look much more like a solid color when you look at them from a distance versus the originals, which really give the shoe a much more hypnotic look. Now, like I said, I do think I prefer the original look, and that could just be because I've seen this static pattern so many times over the last 3 years, but there's something iconic about this pattern. Like, we've seen it on the Zebras, we've seen it on the Yebras, we've seen it on a ton of different 350 V2s, and I just think it's the iconic 350 V2 pattern. Speaking of iconic Yeezy details, we've got to talk about the 350 V2 side stripe. On the original 350 V2, up until about 2018, the side stripe came in this sort of 2-stripe pattern that wrapped all the way around the lateral side of the shoe. In most cases, the side stripe came in 2 different colors. The top color was usually the accent color, and the bottom color was usually the same color as the base of the prime knit upper. Obviously, on the original shoe, the Beluga 1.0s, the top stripe came in this bright neon orange, and the bottom stripe came in a light gray. Now, in some cases, on some colorways, the top stripe would not be the sort of pop color, and instead the text inside the top stripe would be that pop color. Speaking of the text came in 4 letters and 3 numbers, and the text read SPLY 350. Now, in my opinion, and I think also a lot of sane people's opinions, the text stands for Supply 350, which would make sense because you've got YeezySupply.com, SPLY sort of looks like supply, but there is a group of people out there who think that SPLY stands for Saint Pablo Loves You. Now, I think that's just the dumbest thing that it could mean, but at the same time, Kanye's nuts, so it could actually mean that. But I just really don't see how it would mean that. I mean, I really think it means supply. I mean, yes, supply could have another P in there, which would make it a little bit more clear, but I don't know. I just don't think it's Saint Pablo Loves You. I think that's really dumb. I mean, to be honest, I don't think we're ever gonna know. It's been 5 years and no one still really knows what that means, so we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe a designer will come out in the next couple years and say, yeah, it meant supply. A detail that I really love about this original side stripe is that if you look at the toe of the sneaker and the heel of the sneaker, the stripe sort of like fades or pixelates into the ends of the shoe. It just makes the side stripe look so much more interesting, and it gives the shoe a very futuristic look. But moving over to the newer 350 V2s, the Ash Pearls, you can probably see that the side stripe is very different than the originals. And this change actually took place back in 2018 when the Static pair was first released. As you can see on the Static pair, the side stripe is no longer made up of prime knit and is instead made up of this clear plastic mesh. Now, when this shoe first released, I was stoked on this change, not because I didn't like the original side stripe, but because I felt like this change really revitalized the silhouette. It was just so cool to me that you could change the color of your socks and the color of the side stripe on the side of the shoe would also change. Unfortunately, now 3 years later, sneaker, the side stripe doesn't seem to really be semi-translucent anymore. In fact, it's still made of this plasticky material, but instead it's almost completely opaque. The newer 350 V2 side stripes just come in one line. They come in one solid color. Yes, we've had some variations like the semi-translucent plastic mesh or even a 3M or reflective version, but most of the newer pairs that we've had come with this sort of one color opaque look. One thing I really miss about the original 350 V2 side stripe is that this new stripe just kind of ends, both on the heel and on the toe of the sneaker. It doesn't fade into the shoe. It just kind of looks like someone took a pen and just drew a straight line across the side. Well, not really straight, because this line is pretty jacked, but drew a line across the side of the sneaker and then just stopped. Also, actually, even just looking at that, the side stripe on the new ones looks like this sort of wavy line, whereas on the original, it has this very definite curve to it, which I definitely prefer. In addition to that, the newer 350 V2s also feature this new quarter panel on the top half of the lateral side. And in most cases, this quarter panel is the same color or a similar color to the side stripe. In a few of the first colorways that made this change on the shoe, it kind of made the sneaker look like a what the shoe, or like a shoe that was a multicolored look. But now it just kind of makes the shoe look like it has this giant side stripe that covers up a majority of the lateral side. Also on the newer pairs, you've just got this sort of weird rectangular shape that comes in a different color and is seemingly there for no reason. However, if you've followed the history of the 350 V2s, you know that some colorways of this shoe actually feature a heel tab. Now, the only pair of 350 V2s that I own that feature this heel tab are the static pairs, which we've already referred to a lot. And what's interesting about this heel tab is that it only made an appearance on some colorways of the shoe. In fact, the original release and a couple releases after the original release did not feature the heel tab, and the newer releases also don't feature the heel tab. It's only on a couple of different colorways through the middle of the 350 V2's lifespan. Now, I think the reason they added this pull tab is because it was on the original Yeezy Boost 350s and people just seem to want it back. But honestly, now that we're kind of used to not having it, I'm not mad that it's gone, and it never actually seemed to line up very well with the side stripe, so I'm not mad at the omission of it. Speaking of the back of the shoe, why don't we talk about the shape of the heel? So on the original 350 V2s, one of the best ways to tell if your shoe is authentic or fake was because the shape of the shoe kind of ended in this sort of butt bump. It was a super weird detail, and I think the only reason it was there was because they hadn't perfected the manufacturing process yet. Or maybe it was because the shape of the heel of the shoe was so curved inward, it kind of needed to pop out the back to actually work. I'm not sure why they did it, but it was there, and that was one of the best ways to tell if your shoes were actually authentic. However, on the newer versions of 350 V2s, the back is just kind of like a straight line upward that kind of curves out with the pull tab. Yes, it probably looks cleaner overall, but I kind of prefer this sort of curvaceous look on the original 350 V2s. Another detail that's changed a pretty good amount of times between different 350 V2 colorways is the stitching detail that runs down the center of the shoe. Now, what's interesting, if you look at the latest release and the original release, the stitching detail is pretty similar. However, on different versions of the shoe, the stitching's either been hidden or maybe done differently. It's really changed up a good amount of times, but it is nice to see that that's one detail that, at least from the first and the last release, has stayed consistent. Another detail that's changed a good amount of times but has stayed consistent on the most recent and the original release are the rope laces. Both shoes feature rope laces that feel about the same and are about the same thickness, and they both have ends that you can tie. And while that seems like something that should be a no-brainer, some of the shoes that dropped between these two shoes feature something that I like to call an infinity lacing system. And what that is essentially a lace that has no end. It kind of just wraps all the way up, and the only way to tighten the shoe is to pull on the end of it. Now, in a lot of ways, I think that lacing system is cleaner than standard lacing, and I think it might even look better, but at the same time, it means that you can't change out the laces on your shoe without cutting the lacing system. Now, at this point, I really have no idea whether they're gonna stick with that infinity lacing system or just stick to regular laces. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens with future 350 V2 releases. But now let's move inside the shoe and check out the sock liner. So on the original Beluga colorway of this shoe, the sneaker features the Adidas 3 stripes on the heel. However, in this shoe, they seem to be printed. On pretty much every single other 350 V2 colorway, even the colorways that released right after this one, the 3 stripes actually come in a reflective material and are much harder to see when you're looking at the shoe in regular lighting. Actually, on a side note, the structure of the heel on the newer releases seems to be much stiffer than the original release and seems to have a lot more structure. As far as the insoles are concerned, they're pretty similar between releases. They have the same Adidas and Yeezy branding printed on the heel. The overall shape and material of the insoles are the same. The details that are pressed into the bottom of the insoles are the same. The biggest change on the interior of the 350 V2s over time is the sizing. The original 350 V2 Beluga was a shoe that you would definitely need to get a half size up. There was just something about the last that they used, or maybe the pattern that they used to form this sneaker, that made this shoe fit a little bit tight. Thankfully, over the last 5 years, they have seemed to sort of solve that problem, and while the shoe doesn't fit perfectly true to size, the newer 2021 versions definitely feel better on foot than the originals did. While I did go a half size up in the newer version, it definitely feels like a shoe that I could wear true to size if I needed to, whereas the Belugas definitely feel a little bit tight. Oh, a kind of weird change that I just noticed is that on the newer pairs, the 2021 pairs, the size tag comes on the interior of the medial side or the inside of the shoe, whereas on the original pairs, they come on the inside of the lateral side or the outside of the shoe. Not sure exactly why they changed that up, but apparently they did. But those are pretty much the biggest changes between these two shoes, at least that I can find. The midsoles and outsoles of these shoes seem to be made with the same mold. They look exactly the same. The only thing that's really changed are the colors. Obviously, both shoes still use Boost. The one thing that I noticed is that on the original pairs, they seem to be less of these sort of like circular details, which I guess are probably not injection points, but maybe where the mold kind of comes off the Boost. Whereas on the new pairs, you've got a ton of these little circles. It's not a huge change. You're not even gonna notice it because the Boost is on the bottom of your foot, but it's something to keep in mind. The one thing I don't like about this newer release, which isn't a problem on the Beluga 1.0s and really is only a problem on certain colorways, is that because they use a slightly different color of rubber on the outsole than the midsole of the shoe, because the outsole rubber wraps up onto the shoe in the heel, you get this sort of like weird, almost like poop stain look, which I'm just not a fan of. You don't have that on the Belugas because the rubber on the outsole is pretty much the same color as the rubber on the midsole, but on some of these lighter colorways, it just looks bad. Overall, no matter what pair of 350 V2s that you end up picking up, it's fair to say that this shoe is one of the most iconic sneakers to drop in the last decade. This silhouette has just completely changed the landscape of sneakers. I mean, in the same way that the iPhone changed the landscape of phones, people are copying this shoe both in materials and in shape. It's one of those iconic sneaker designs that I don't think is ever really gonna go out of style. Yes, there are definitely some changes between the original 350 V2 and the newer 350 V2s, and I think if you value fit and comfort and sizing over anything else, get one of the newer pairs. However, for me, I just love the way that the originals look. I love the patterns that they used, I love the colors that they used, and in particular, this Beluga colorway is just so unique and so lovable. So for me, if I had to choose any pair of 350 V2s, I would definitely go with the original Belugas. Of course, with the older pairs, you're gonna have to buy them for resale, which is definitely more expensive, especially when you get to an older pair like this. But if you're a sneaker collector or a sneaker connoisseur or just a lover of Yeezy sneakers, this is a must-have. But with that, we pretty much wrap up the entire video for today. Now, I would love to know your thoughts on the Yeezy Boost 350 V2 and which colorway out of all the colorways that have dropped is your favorite. So make sure to let me know in the comment section down below. Once again, huge thank you to FARFETCH for sponsoring today's video. If you guys would like to check out anything that we talked about in today's video or any of my favorites, make sure to click the link in the description below and use my code SETH10YT. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell down below if you haven't yet, and I'll see you all in the next one.